Hello, I'm Ashley Mikal. Welcome to the K League United podcast. Paul Neate here, along with Andrew Farrell and Nathan Sartain. Hello, gents. Are we good?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Aye, not so bad. All the better now that the internationals are good and over. Final round is coming up, or starting this Friday. I still don't like the name. It's 5 rounds, not 1. I don't know why they've called it that. I mean, it's confusing. It's like there are literally 5 more rounds. You can't call it round 1, 2, 3, whatever, and then say that the last 5 are 1 round. You know what I mean?
Yeah, naming stuff like that has been an issue over here before. Like, as we said, like it's even when it's written in Korean, it's not called the Korean Cup, but it's just called just things like that. Or the kind of, I don't even like the wording of Final A and Final B as well. I don't mind the split. There's something unique. I know it's been done in Scottish football before. There is something a little bit unique about it, and it does bring us some intrigue, especially to the bottom of the table, where like Incheon they got to survive by playing against the teams around them. But why is it called Final B? Like, surely it'd be like just a better term for it.
Yeah, I do like the split. I'm sure Nathan loves it now that Gangwon are definitely safe, and then there's no chance of any late season drama and a repeat of last year having to go through the playoffs. But they used to call it the championship round and the relegation round. I think it was like pre-2019 or whatever, maybe even pre-2018. But I have a theory about it. I reckon it's because Jeonbuk used to basically win the league. In fact, I think in 2017 they won the league before the split had even began. So I reckon they thought, well, we can't call it that anymore because Jeonbuk just win it anyway. So then we have to change it. You know what I mean? So, but now with how tight it is in the top and the bottom, you could genuinely call it the championship round and the relegation round. But alas. We are not in charge of marketing, unfortunately. We are just here to talk about things, and we're back with the weekly podcasts. We're having a look at the 3 biggest races across both divisions: K League 2 and the race for promotion. That was last week's episode. Final B and the battle against relegation. That's next week's. And Final A and the title race and the race for AFC Champions League qualification. That's what we'll look at today. So what we'll do is we'll start from 6th place and work our way up the table, looking at teams and their most recent results and how they may have affected their chances of achieving whatever it is that they want to achieve this season. And then we'll look ahead to the next fixture and assess whether fans should be worried or optimistic. So, starting with the ACL qualification contenders, the teams in 6th up to 4th. Andrew, you've become our resident Suwon FC correspondent because of just how often you frequent that wonderful Castle Park.
I don't know what happened. This is the second podcast in a row talking about Final A. I've got lumped with Suwon FC. But as I mentioned on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, I think Suwon season is over. And as fate would have it, their last game before the break, Pohang away, is also their first match after the international break. That's this coming Friday. And this represents, in my opinion anyway, this represents their best and their only chance of picking up a victory before the end of the season. The teams drew 1-1 at the Steel Yard thanks to a 92nd minute equaliser by Ji Dong-won. Suwon were on a 3-game losing streak before the equaliser in Pohang, and that run included an embarrassing 6-0 drubbing at home by relegation threatened Jeonbuk Motors. Championship hopes have absolutely evaporated, but it is worth remembering that they were bang in the title race only a few weeks ago. Then Kwon Jong-won moved to the Middle East, Lee Sung-woo headed down the Honam Expressway to Jeonju, and Son Jun-ho had his contract terminated. Coupled with the disastrous run of form, which saw them losing 3 games in a row, that ended any title hopes that they had, and like the dreams of continental qualification. They currently sit in 6th. They're only 2 points behind Pohang, but I genuinely can't see where the next win comes from. And look, you were saying there about expectations. I'm sure in February fans' expectations was to avoid automatic relegation. Any finish above 10th would be cherished. So this season has been an absolute dream for Suwon FC. But I think hopes of qualifying for continental competition now looks unlikely. So their fans should be worried in that sense. But if the worry at the beginning of the season was avoiding relegation, then they've absolutely nothing to worry about, basically, because I don't think anything that can happen from here on in will dampen the mood. As I said, their next game is against Pohang Steelers, and their record against the Steelers isn't particularly strong. The last victory came in 2022, and since then they've only picked up 2 points from a possible 18 against the Steelers. FC Seoul, the only team that's between Suwon and Pohang in the table, they're up next, and admittedly in a very short spell of history, Suwon have an absolutely dreadful record against Kim Gi-dong's side. They've only won once in 11 matches. That too was in 2022. Sorry, once in 17 matches, and that was in 2022. And after that, they faced the teams that have a genuine title or ACL target. So it's been a great season for Suwon, but I don't think it's going to be too much longer now before they start thinking about the beach. So fans' expectations have already achieved what they wanted, a little bit like Gangwon, but in terms of qualification, in terms of title races, it's all over.
Yeah, fair enough. It was a sort of a late goal that will have felt like a win when they got that draw against Pohang or whatnot. But yeah, you have to think that they're just playing with house money now, Suwon FC, and anything that happens from now is a bonus, really. But let's move up the table just a little bit. FC Seoul, they lost 3-1 away to Gwangju before the break. 4 goals in this, but the deadlock wasn't broken until the 74th minute through Ho Yul. Igoni made it 2-0 on 80 with a huge assist from VAR because it took quite a long time for the ref to check this one. Lingard pulled one back on 85 minutes with a very well-taken goal, his 5th of the campaign. But when Seoul were trying to get an equaliser, they were going forward and really trying to get themselves back on level terms. Gwangju hit them on the counter, and Asani emphatically made it 3-1. Seoul looked a bit vulnerable and had little in response to really a persistent and aggressive Gwangju. They were sort of a bit shell-shocked once Gwangju made it 2-0. You could see the look on Kim Ki-dong's face on the sidelines. He looked a bit like, well, this wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't really what he was expecting. Obviously, Seoul haven't got a good record against Gwangju this season. They lost all 3 games against them, and 2 of those games were away as well. So not a good result. In terms of how this has affected their chances of the title, well, Seoul were one of the teams that were perhaps in both races, the title and ACL. This result means that they are now definitely out of the title race, 11 points behind Ulsan, but only 1 point behind Pohang, who sit in 4th. And with Gimcheon unable to qualify for the ACL, it is definitely still in Seoul's hands, or certainly it's still well within their reach, even if it's just ACL 2, which would be a winnable competition for them. Having spent so long in Final B, it would definitely signal a bit of progress on their part. So, in terms of whether the fans should be worried or optimistic, probably a little concerned because the form hasn't been great. 1 win in 5. It has tailed off a bit. They're also not scoring too many. 4 goals in their last 5 games. But it will be easy to get despondent. They've have to really think about how it's been over the last few years. They've got themselves into a very good position. And to be even talked about in the title conversation, albeit briefly, after years of Final B misery, is a reason to smile and be very positive about the long-term direction of the club and the team. It also might help motivate Lingard to sort of stay beyond this season. His form and impact have probably caught the attention of teams in bigger leagues. But he does seem to have fallen in love with the league and the club. I think he said on Media Day on Wednesday that he cancelled his trip back to the UK to go and see his daughter because he wasn't feeling 100% sharp. So he wanted to stay back and train and make sure that he was ready for the next game, and obviously the next 5 games will have a big say in how their season ends. So Kim Ki-dong said that he wants his team to be more confident. I think we probably will see that. They will have that 2-week break to really get on the training pitch and just sort of remind themselves that they should be happy and feeling a little bit more confident. So next game, well, Gangwon away. A very tough game for them, but they beat them the last time that they faced Gangwon, albeit at home. They can take confidence from that. They hit Gangwon on the counter-attack and were very incisive in doing so. So if they can be a bit more direct and catch Gangwon when they try to work the way up the pitch, then they might have a chance. I suppose it might depend on what state the pitch is in, because obviously they that will be a big factor. Might be best to try and sit a bit deeper initially. I think Incheon got turned inside out when they tried to go in too tight on Gangwon last time out. And obviously the incisiveness of Yang Min-hyuk and Lee Sang-hon when they were on the pitch together really hurt them. So try and be cautious and then see where you are at half-time and then try and hit them on the counter. Tough game, but this will be a good chance to sort of lay down a marker and say, we're not done yet. So there we go. Right then. Up the pitch to Nathan. Pohang Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, the last result was obviously that 1-1 we've touched on to Suwon, and I think it typified a lot of recent Pohang performances where, even when they've got results, it's not exactly been the most exciting football, attacking-wise. They don't create a lot of high-quality chances, and I think it's a tale of almost their season in the way they've tailed off. Of regressing to the mean. I know it's been talked about on this podcast before, but they have the third lowest XG creation in the league. They've outscored that by 10, so I think it was always going to come back, not to haunt them necessarily, but to show, okay, you can't keep doing it the whole season. And I think that 1-1 draw now has probably cemented the idea that they're not in the title race, and almost not brought them down to earth. That's too harsh a statement, but I think give them that check that it is a transition season, as I think a lot of people expected coming in. I think some people actually thought Pohang could struggle more than they have done this year, I'd say. And, they're in fourth place. I think when it comes to continental qualification, they're still very much in the driver's seat. You'd cling to the fact they're unbeaten in 3 games, 2 wins and a draw, and really look to try and push on. I think the fact that they have Suwon again at home is a big opportunity to right a couple of wrongs and put your best foot forward to start Final A. And then I think, I'd be looking at the East Coast Derby as well. They're at home. That's a chance for a big win. Send your fans home happy for the season and just see where you finish. I think it's a case of you might finish 5th, you might finish 4th, you might sneak into 3rd if you're lucky. But, and it's going to sound a bit of a cop-out, but whether fans should be worried or optimistic, I'd say both and neither. I'd say worried, no, because realistically you're not going to drop further down than you already are. Optimistic, maybe not. It wasn't too long ago they were on a terrible losing streak, and you can never rule that out again, especially this season. And I think, the defensive promise that they showed early season, I think they've become a little bit more vulnerable as it's gone on. They've conceded a fair few late goals recently. Even in the 2-1 win over Gangwon, they conceded very late, but they just went up right up the other end and scored to win it. So I think fans should probably be thinking, it's all right, it's a transition season, we've done all right, let's just see the job through, whether it's ACL 2 or Champions League Elite. We can, qualify there and then build from that going into next season with where I'd say they probably need to recruit in a couple of positions.
They've also got the FA Cup final too as well to look forward to, which could be a saving grace for them. But so let's just, looking at these 3 teams then, it might end up being that 5th becomes an ACL 2 spot. This is just, with Gimcheon not being able to qualify. So it's probably going to be one team then that misses out. Are we all in agreement of who that might be that doesn't make it?
Sorry, Suwon. Sorry, Suwon.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Said, with 5 games to go, the best that they can possibly hope for is 2 points, and 2 points at the moment gets them to 4th. But the other teams are obviously going to pick up points. They have to, because we're playing against each other as well. So I would say we're all in agreement that Suwon will finish 6th. And then it's a matter, I would imagine you guys probably feel the same way, it's Pohang or Seoul for 5th. I don't
Yeah,
see
fair enough.
I don't see the top three dropping from where they currently are.
Yeah, the only team in the top half to have a negative goal difference, and they do have the lowest goals scored tally as well, and up there with, I think it's a joint second highest number of goals conceded. So, yeah, they obviously, as you mentioned, Andrew, they have lost key players. It's been difficult for them. If I was a Suwon FC fan, I wouldn't care what happens from here on in. Whatever happens now is purely a bonus. Whereas Pohang might feel a little bit of pressure to really sort of make sure that they at least have ACL qualification. But they do have the FA Cup coming up at the week after the final day of the K League 1 season. So we'll see how that pans out and what happens with Gimcheon and where
Seoul,
just.
I was going to say that because I think at the beginning of the season we predicted that Pohang might struggle because of the massive turnover of staff and players. But so we figured they might have been a year away from being championship contenders. But I distinctly remember that preview show we had them competing for the top four, and they still are. They're still competing for the top four. But obviously Jesse Lingard was talking about his goal is to win the championship, and he wants to know if the rest of his teammates feel the same way. I find it interesting as well, as you were saying there about Seoul earlier on. Like, I would think that they'd feel uncomfortable where they currently are because Pohang are clearly in a stage of redevelopment, whereas this should be year one of a new Seoul. So I think if Seoul finished fifth, I would consider this to be not a positive season.
I agree with you, actually. Yeah, I think it would be disappointing because their form, they were in great form, and then it really tailed off. Obviously, in isolation, a 0-0 draw away to Jeonbuk is a good result. I know Jeonbuk aren't the Jeonbuk that they have been for in seasons past, but they are battling for their lives, and they haven't got a great record there, at least until before this season. But then that first 6 minutes against Daejeon at home it just seems to have hit them for six because they never really recovered from then. They obviously got themselves back into that game, but then they didn't have the character to be able to see that game out, or even just sort of earn a draw. They end up losing, and then against Daegu, they think they have the game won, and they let Cezinha have all the space that he wants, and then they get hit from him. The game against Suwon, obviously, you think, okay, back on track now, but it was a very slender win against Suwon at home. And then the game against Gwangju, as we just mentioned earlier, they just looked shell-shocked and a little bit like they needed the international break to come. They needed a little bit of a rest, and they needed a little bit of time on the training pitch to sort of, okay, lads, let's just regroup and refocus. But yeah, I agree with you, Andrew. Fifth place will not be in any way satisfactory for them at all. Yeah, they should be third or fourth. Realistically, they're not going to finish third. I think it's going to be obviously, Gangwon have got a 5-point lead over them as we head into round 34. This game on Sunday is, very, very important for both teams. But they should at least be in ACL2. I think they'll definitely get an ACL2, and that might soften the blow a little bit because with the ACL2, looking at the teams that are involved in it this year and the group that Jeonbuk were given, which is Muangtong are a good side, but it looks winnable, doesn't it? Really, there's no reason why a K League team wouldn't fairly comfortably win that competition. So, yeah, Cebu FC. Whatever. Anyway, let's park the ACL chat there for the time being, and we'll move on to the title contenders. There are three of them, and one of them is Gangwon. What's all that about, Nathan?
I still don't know, to be honest. I pinch myself every time I watch them, and I think, hang on, is this the same team of last year? Obviously, it isn't. It's very different. But no, it's been a great season, and I think you look no further than the last match, that 3-1 win against Incheon, where in the last 10 minutes alone, you'd say they could have scored 5 times. I think is just that is a game I'd circle as if you want to know what Gangwon are about this season, it's that. It was fast, it's direct, it's attacking. Alright, they did have a shaky, 10-15 minutes just before and then just after the equaliser. But I thought they were so good in that game, and it was one of them where they played almost as the home team while they were away, and the away ends have been full and full of atmosphere as well. Not just bodies, which I think's been a major help. They've had a lot of fan support behind them this season, but I just thought creatively, they were excellent in that 3-1 win, and it shows why they've transformed from the team who were by far the lowest scorers last season into the top scorers this season, and they're only a couple of goals away now from breaking the most goals they've ever scored in a single K League 1 season. So I think that shows, they've stuck to the guns with the attacking performances, even when sometimes, it hasn't worked. I don't necessarily want to say backfired, but, you mentioned that defeat at FC Seoul, the 2-0. I thought, maybe that was one where Gangwon should have adapted. They didn't, they lost, but there's been a lot of times this season where they've dusted themselves off, went again and got a big win or two, and I think that win just about keeps them in the title race. They've overturned a similar 6-point deficit top before now, and then obviously they have actually led at the top of the table. But I'd say they're on the fringes of the title race, and they really need to hit the ground running if they're to really push for it. But they're in pole position for Champions League Elite. I think you're 4 points ahead of fourth. You've got 2 home games to start Final A. Those are 2 massive chances to really put your idea of where you want to be next season at the forefront. Win those 2 games and you're suddenly thinking, okay, we're going to finish at least third. But for the fans, I think regardless of what happens now, you've got to be optimistic. It's been a record-breaking year. It's the highest ever points tally they've got. It's the most amount of wins they've ever got in a single season. Longest win streak, and obviously they've had some players who've just had complete blowaway seasons. Who knows what'll come of the rest of the season. They might win 3, lose 2. One thing I would say as a point of caution is, and the table is on my Twitter account, Gangwon have struggled against teams in the top half this season, so it might not be a big push. They've got most of the points, I think over 75% were against bottom half teams, so I think I wouldn't say they're going to suddenly go and put a big run together. They've only won 4 games against top half teams all season, so it has been a struggle. 9 of the 10 losses have been against top half teams. So, but I think you've got to be optimistic. This is a manager, I think, who deserves to be in the conversation for manager of the season. They've got several players who I think should be in the conversation for player of the season. And the next match, Seoul at home, it's one thing I'd say as a negative is it's one of the 2 current K League 1 teams Yoon Jong-wan has not beaten as a manager, as FC Seoul. As Gangwon manager, that is. So Seoul have had Gangwon's number recently. They've beaten them 3 times in a row if you include the cup game. But Gangwon have only lost twice at home all season, so you never know. I'd say obviously they've got to go for the win, but a point wouldn't be the end of the world. But yeah, I'd say 2 home games, Seoul, and then Gimcheon. You're looking at, there's your chance to hit the ground running and really cement yourself in the title race if that's what you want to do. Yeah,
you mentioned some of the awards. I think Yang Min-hyuk is obviously nailed on to win Young Player of the Year. That's just a given. I think Hwang Min-gi will definitely be in the best 11. That's just definitely going to be how it is. And yeah, the manager definitely should be. I think it's you would have to disregard Kim Pang-gom because he's only been there for half a season. He'll probably get the award because that's just what they do. I think Hwang Sun-on got it when he won the league with Seoul in 2016, even though he took over in June. So a very similar situation. But I think whoever finishes in second, that manager should be getting manager of the year. And at the moment, obviously that's going to might be Gimcheon, but Gangwon have Gimcheon at home in round 35. You never know. You never
I want
know.
to add to that as well. I was at the game that Nathan was talking about recently, that game against Incheon, and it was a pleasure to be there. Like, there was that spell either side of Incheon's equaliser when they were down to 10 men, but for some reason Gangwon looked really shell-shocked by I think they missed two really good chances on the hour mark, and then they just got kind of dragged into a dogfight of some sort, and they seemed to be shell-shocked the situation they found themselves in. But the goal, I think we talked about it on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, the goal that Gangwon scored from to make it 2-1 is quite possibly the worst free kick you will ever see in your life. But the counter-attack was absolutely sensational. The finish was brilliant. But with 85 minutes on the clock, and you're right, they could have scored at least 5 after that. I mean, they missed the penalty earlier on in that game as well. Like, it was one of those games that it could well have been 7 or 8-2, and yet they didn't go ahead. They didn't retake the lead until the 85th minute. But yeah, the counter-attack was sensational, but the free kick that led up to it was, I mean, you can imagine it in like a question of sport, like what happens next at that particular
Yeah. Overhead kick from the Incheon number 9, or, you know what I mean? Does it go straight in? Nobody, even Ali McCoy's store, Sue Barker is not gonna be getting like Gangwon goal. But speaking of sort of Gangwon games that have been hugely important, Andrew, you were at that game at Big Bird on the final day last season when they needed a point and got the point to stay up. Suwon at home only needed a win to sort of avoid relegation. What a turnaround it's been over the last, well, let's just say 18 months if you include when Yunjongwan came in the middle of last season. It's just chalk and cheese. But could you see from like towards the end of last season, obviously ask this question to both of you, but Andrew first, could you see any of those sort of like hints that we might be able to see this kind of exciting Gangwon team? Obviously, Yangmin Hyok's come out of nowhere, but there's still a lot of players that are still there now.
No, like I said, a lot of players are still there now, and the same management. But the style of football is completely different. Like they were so tedious last season, and like it was that weird situation whereby survival was in both teams' hands going into that game. Gangwon knew they just had to not lose, and they were guaranteed to stay up at least for another week. Whereas Suwon knew if they won, then they were guaranteed to stay up for another week, and then Gangwon would either go down automatically or they end up in the playoff anyway. But they were difficult to watch. They were difficult to watch for all of last season. And then I think we talked about in the podcast, I think that the moment that I really realized this season just how fun it was watching them was that home game against Incheon. For some reason, they've had Incheon's number all season, but that 5 or 6 minutes before half time, and poor Luke was at that game, but that was as classy like a last 5-10 minutes to the end of the first half as you're ever likely to see. It was brilliant. It was really exciting to watch. I don't know how they've turned it around with the same manager and mostly the same players. I think it's extraordinary, the evolution that's taken place in that team. But in reference to that game, because Nathan was talking about the sold-out crowd, they brought a sold-out crowd to Suwon that day as well. They drew the game 0-0. They should have won that game, actually. They were the better team on the day, and it might have been more fun had they won and just kind of sent Suwon down that way instead. But I don't know. Like, I think they're the most fun team. They're the most exciting team to watch in K League this season. And last season, it was the complete opposite of that.
Yeah, I mean, Nathan, obviously, you were in the country at the end of November, and you saw Gangwon beat Daejeon away. You were at that game. Yeah. Obviously, that then set up this sort of last sort of 5 games really. Then in all competitions of unbeaten. Could you imagine if future Nathan had at that point said, "Nathan, listen, we're going to be in the ACL hunt next season"? What would you have said? I mean, surely even you, even like with the rose-tinted spectacles, wouldn't have foreseen this happening at all.
See, yeah, I'd have laughed at you if you told me that. The thing is, I do actually think I could have seen a a lot. I saw the signs that this season was going to be better than I think a lot of people expected. You know, you read the prediction tables before the season. I saw a lot of people putting them in the bottom three, and maybe it was maybe it was just me, you know, being a glass half full for once. But I thought there were signs, especially towards the end of last season, that there could be a turnaround. I think people forget the situation Yoon Jong-wan inherited. It was in the middle of quite a public transfer saga. And the team had only won 2 games all season, so I think people forget that situation. It was a difficult one to come into. A lot of players were out of form, and it took them a while to figure out, you know, the best combinations to play. And I think for me, it was almost when I was in the country for the 2 games was there. All right, one was a 1-1 draw where they conceded very late at home to Jeju, but for me, it was. I saw signs there. You know, there was a bit of creativity. He'd started to put Hwang Mun-gi a right back, and I thought, okay, he suddenly looks a lot better than he did whenever he'd come on. You know, as an impact sub on the wing. I started. You know, Ali Bayer played. Obviously, he's not at Gangwon now, but he really, I thought, helped shape that midfield at the end of last season, and I started to see signs of, okay, there's something to build from, and then I think obviously they had the pre-season in Europe, and I think that's really helped because they played against, you know, European teams, a bit of a different flavour of football. But as much as I say, I could see, you know, the foundations, I almost don't think they've worked off them same foundations this season. It's almost as if it was a rip it up and start again thing. So in that regard, I really wouldn't have expected it to go this well. But I think early on in the season, after they'd got an initial, not poor run, but they weren't seeing out games. Once they started winning, it started to become a thing of, okay, I think they'll be all right. And then as it's gone on, it's like, oh, okay, I think we're going to finish in the top half. And then it's, are we in the title race? Really? and then, so I think that it's, you know, the expectations have almost evolved with the club this season. And yeah, I mean, I think as much as I almost thought they would miss Kim Dae-won more, they have missed him, but not to the degree that I thought. And I can't wait to see him back. But yeah, for now at least, they've put together, I think, an excellent season that no one could have expected. And even the signs that they would have had a better season at the end of last year, I think those signs aren't really present anymore because the defensive stability they had at that time isn't necessarily there, but they've overhauled the attack to such a degree that I don't think any team can really keep them out.
Like they won 6 games that season, 6 matches in 38. It is unbelievable that they even stayed. I know they drew 16 games or something, but to win 6 games out of 38 and not go down is absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Well, moving on to another team from the countryside that's in a surprise title race. It's Gimcheon Sangmu. Andrew, what's going on there?
Well, this is a nice, handy podcast for me. I get to pick 2 sides who are not going to qualify for continental competition for variety, and 2 sides that we probably didn't figure we're going to finish as highly up the table as they currently are. I mean, there was the uncertainty over Gimcheon and you were after players and how they were going to work out. But did anybody see them in the championship race going into the final month of the season? Probably unlikely. So on to Gimcheon anyway. Similar enough to Suwon against Pohang. Gimcheon's next match is against a team that they played before the international break and split in the league. But instead of another difficult trip to Munsu, Gimcheon will welcome Ulsan HD to their stadium this coming Saturday at 4:30 p.m. Nothing short of a home victory will keep the title race open, and for that, you hope a big crowd turns up to support the team. The gap currently stands at 5 points with 5 matches to play. If Gimcheon can knock that down to 2 or 4 to play, then we're guaranteed a truly remarkable conclusion to the 2024 season. Any other result other than 3 points for Gimcheon will more than likely hand Ulsan their third straight title. When the two sides met in Munsu earlier on this month, Mo Jae-hyun gave visitors a first half lead. They held on to that until Kosung Bomb's YouTube highlight reel diving header. Don't know if you guys saw it, but it was just a great diving header about 50 minutes ago. And then 5 minutes later, Yagu showed exactly why Ulsan had been chasing the Brazilian at Gangwon as he scored the winner. A draw would have been a fair result that day, but it doesn't matter now. In theory, those drop points in Munsu have greatly affected the title chances. A victory would have put Gimcheon top before the split, but because they host Ulsan this weekend, all is not lost. They do end the season as well with three winnable games. Three winnable games against Suwon and Seoul at home, and then Pohang away. But as mentioned, the title run depends entirely on Chung Yun-young's side winning on Saturday. With the second best defensive record and goal difference in the league, Gimcheon will fancy their chances of finishing in the top three at the very, very least. The gap to fourth place Pohang at the moment is 5 points. I don't know what the fans' expectations were at the start of the season. It is worth remembering that Gimcheon gained automatic promotion last season because Busan wonderfully had this just the most wonderful meltdown of all time in the final 2 weekends of the season. It's unlikely too many people would have fancied them to have a title push, but no matter what happens, this has been a great season. You do get the feeling, though, that I think I talked about this in the podcast before, that they dropped 19 points since the beginning of July, and that perhaps if they had maintained the form that they'd shown at the beginning of the season, they would be top now and favourites for the title. So I just... Sometimes you wonder, will there be some fans out there who think we may have actually thrown this away with our form over the latter part of the summer, especially throwing away a 1-0 lead in Munsu. But for me anyway, look, it's been a great season, and their chances of winning the title are just below 50%. Like, they really have to win on Saturday, though. No other result will do.
Yeah, I do wonder with Gimcheon and Gangwon, the moment that people in the media started talking about the title, maybe then they started to sort of, ooh, okay. Because Gangwon, as soon as you sort of started talking about it, it was like, oh, right, it's time to sort of take it a bit seriously now. But they seem to be a bit better when there's a bit of freedom. Gimcheon might, it's all a bit of a laugh. We're all doing our military service, but not really. We're sort of, some players get to play more than they do for their parent clubs. It's like, you don't really take it too seriously, do you? But now they're starting to talk about the title, the K League 1 title, after winning K League 2 last year. It's just, they shouldn't even be here, really, because obviously, like you said, Andrew, Busan monumentally messed that up last year. It was like, it was like 2 games. If they won either of their last 2 games, they'd have won the league, and they
needed 3
points.
Yeah, they needed 3 points in the last 2 games, and they came out of it with 1 point. And they had the 3 points in the bag, and then Jorge, who's now at Pohang, 50-minute equaliser in Asia. And then, just to make things even better, Gimcheon knocked Busan out of the cup earlier on the season, which must have been must have really stank for Busan. But yeah, you're right. They shouldn't be where they are. They shouldn't be in second place. They shouldn't have a shot at the title. But
I love it.
Managed to mould a championship team like that is just, it's scarcely believable.
Yeah. It just shows, actually, as well, how the Gimcheon job could be a bit of a sort of apprenticeship for the full national team job, because you're just basically picking the best Korean players, obviously, that are based in the country or that are, sort of haven't done their military service. So, Chung Jung-young, he was obviously part of the KFA setup once upon a time. Wonder if he wants to sort of... I wouldn't be surprised if he just thinks, you know what, I've won K League 2, I got us into the, top 3, should have been the Champions League, but we can't do it. Now it's time to sort of rest on my laurels and go somewhere else. But yeah, I would love it if they somehow manage to do it just for the story of it. But they have Ulsan HD ahead of them, as Andrew just said, that Ulsan beat Gimcheon 2-1 last time out. They came from behind Ulsan, so this will have probably felt like an even bigger victory against their main title rivals. As you mentioned, Andrew, Kosung Bomb level with that great diving header after Mo Jae-hyun had given Gimcheon the lead. And then Ulsan, they made the most of that momentum once they did equalise. They scored again very soon after through Yargo. So a big win in terms of who it was against and how it was won as well, I think. How that result has affected the chances of the title, well, this win means to me it's basically one hand on the trophy for Ulsan. They are 5 points clear, which does feel like a lot given how tight the title race has been at various points this season. Psychologically, I think beating Gimcheon and coming from behind to do so will have done them the world of good. Should fans be worried or optimistic? Very optimistic, obviously. What's also encouraging is that Iago and Ataru are making important contributions at a very important time of the season. They've obviously, for Iago, it took a little bit of a long time to get going in an Ulsan shirt. Ataru's been a little bit in and out of the team, but when he has played, he's usually contributed with some important assists or the odd goal here and there. It's cliche, but I think they've probably found form at the right time. They had that difficult patch in the middle of the season. They had that uncertainty with the manager. They've got Kim Pang-gon in charge now. He looks like he's got them playing. It looks like they've got them believing again. They've got an identity again. It was all a little bit sort of uncertain when Hong Myung-bo was getting linked to the national team job, and it was sort of endless. I think now all that uncertainty is gone. It's having a positive effect on the players and what they're doing on the pitch. Next game, well, someone needs to send the fixture computer off for an upgrade or something, because we have another repeat of round 33, albeit with Ulsan away at Gimcheon, as Andrew just said. This is a great chance to lay down a marker. They will not want to let Gimcheon back into the title race. It would be fantastic for the neutral if they did, of course, but they really need to be the champions that they have been for the last two seasons and just get the job done, be professional, be clinical, and do it. They are unbeaten against Gimcheon this season, 2 wins and a draw, but they were narrow wins, 3-2 and 2-1, and that 3-2, they had a 3-0 lead and then very nearly let it slip. Concentration should be important for them. Won't be easy, especially away from home, but like all of these round 34 matches, they will probably set the tone for the rest of Final A and Final B. A win will give them basically, an 8-point lead maybe, or if Gangwon win, then it'll certainly be 6 points or whatever. So huge rounds of matches coming up. It will depend, obviously, what happens in these round 34 matches. But as things stand at the moment, gentlemen, start with you, Nathan. Who's winning the title?
Ulsan, I think. To be honest, it's a bit of a dampener because we've talked about, the great stories that would be for the team. But I almost think if Ulsan win this week, that's it. I think you've almost wrapped it up in essence. So yeah. And I think they will go on to win the league regardless of whether they win at the weekend.
Fair enough, Andrew.
Yeah, I don't think it matters what happens at the weekend. I think they're going to win the championship anyway. The fact that it's still in their own hands, they can lose 10-0 on Saturday in Gimcheon, and the title is still in their own hands. I think they would settle for a draw. I'd love to know if you sat down and asked them, like, do you want to go there and win, or would you take a draw right now? Would you take 1 point out of Gimcheon? Obviously, Gimcheon would not accept a point out of that game, but I think even if Gangwon win and they close the gap on Ulsan that way, I think Ulsan would be happy with a draw, just because they do have Suwon to come up, and they do have, I know it's Pohang and it's a derby, but they're just a much better team than Pohang are at the moment. So I think no matter what happens on Saturday, Gimcheon win the title. No matter what happens on Saturday, Ulsan win the title. I'm going to name all the teams here before I finally get the right number. But I do think that Gimcheon will sneak into second.
It's like your grandmother calling you every of your your brothers, sisters, your cousin's name before they get to you. Yeah. No. Yeah. Fair enough. I think. Yeah. I can't really argue. It's funny, and I've said this before on the podcast, is that how Ulsan were the team that we all wanted to win the league to end the sort of dominance of Jeonbuk, but now they've done it twice in a row. We're like, again, can you not? But yeah. It's not just that as well. It's just because of the story, like we said before. The story of whether it be Gangwon or Gimcheon, how good would that be for a sort of one of the a team that isn't backed by a huge corporation to go on and win the K League 1 title would be incredible. But still a long way to go.
Point this out as well. It was 2 years ago because it came up in footballogy there. 2 years ago today, I was at Gangwon 1, Ulsan 2 in Chuncheon, and that was the day that it was 2 years ago to this day, October the 16th. Whenever you're listening to this. And that ended a run since 2005, wasn't it? Ulsan hadn't won a championship since then. There's obviously tears. It was a momentous day for Ulsan, and I was there. Like I was there as a neutral, but I was in the Ulsan section. I wanted them to win the title that day. I wanted them to go to Gangwon and win, and they did. And as you said, it was momentous. It was a lot of fun to see a team end the drought as long as that, especially after so many near misses. But now we've had enough. Now it's time to move on, you know. Maybe we'll give them one more, but there has to be. I mean, there's been a great title battle this season, but I'd feel a little bit more uncertain about Ulsan's chance of winning the title if it was a more traditional Jeonbuk or FC Seoul or Pohang Steelers who are chasing them down. The fact that the teams in second and third are Gimcheon and Gangwon, it just doesn't fill me with any confidence that anybody else could win this title.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, the round 34 games begin on Friday. Pohang Steelers against Suwon FC. That one's got English commentary. Gwangju FC versus Daegu FC in the Moonlight Derby. They're both at 7:30. Both Gwangju and Pohang are in the AFC Champions League elite action on Tuesday, hence them playing a day earlier. Essentially away games, both those two teams, as Gwangju will be in Yongin and Pohang in the sticks in Thailand. On Saturday, Jeonbuk play Daejeon with Bins and I on commentary. That's going to be awful, painful, fists flying, and that's just in the commentary booth. And then Incheon against Jeju at 4:30, and then Gimcheon against Ulsan also at 4:30. On Sunday, just the one game, Gangwon against Seoul. That has English commentary, and that's going to start at 2 o'clock Korea time. So lots to look forward to. We'll be back next week. Look at all 6 teams in Final B next week, and we'll look at who's going down and who's going to stay up in one of the tightest scraps in the league's history. But for me, Paul Neitz, Andrew Farrell, and Nathan Sartain, thanks for tuning in.